This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. I don't know if you caught it this morning. This was in the hour before we went on the air. But Jim Jordan was being all shouty and yelly and disrespectful to Merrick Garland, as were most of his Republican colleagues. It was really a despicable display. And Jordan went through this whole litany of right-wing conspiracy theory charges. And then it went to Jerry Nadler, who's his, who's the minority leader, the head Democrat on the committee. And Jerry Nadler says, witnesses before this committee have testified under oath that everything Jim Jordan just said was a lie. I mean, it was just, that's all he had to say. But it was like, wow. And I just, I was going to say what has happened. Obviously, we know what has happened. The Republican Party has been Donald Trumpified. And, it's terrible. Meanwhile, the Republicans released yesterday their budget document, proposing $9 trillion in cuts, saying this, you want to fund the government for 2024? The 2024 fiscal year starts at the end of this month. If you want to fund the government for fiscal 2024, here's what you have to do. You have to cut Social Security. You have to cut food stamps. You have to cut aid to women and children. You have to cut aid to housing. You have to cut Medicare. You have to cut Medicaid. And you have to give us a new tax break for America's billionaires. Seriously, they laid it all out. And the whole pivot point, the fulcrum, the lever that they used, the meme that they based it all on was, we need to balance the budget. You recall the only president in modern times to have had balanced budgets throughout his entire 8 years is Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton did not add a penny to our deficit. But that's because, he went along with the Republicans. He ended big government as we know it. He ended welfare as we know. He made huge cuts. And that led to huge victories by Republicans all over the country. So how did this come about? Well, back in the 1970s, Jude Wanniski, as a Republican strategist, laid out this strategy in the Wall Street Journal, in an article in the Wall Street Journal, in which he recommended that Republicans should pursue a new kind of economics and a new kind of politics. He invented something that he called supply-side economics. He said, the old demand-side economics, the way that economies traditionally work, which is, the economy is driven by people spending money. 70% of the entire economy of the United States is consumer spending. And so when consumers have more money, the economy heats up. When consumers have less money, the economy cools down. It's a pretty straightforward formula. And but Jude Wanniski said, no, that's not how it works. It's actually supply side. If the companies manufacture a lot of goods, so there's more things in stores, that will entice us to spend more money. Now, there's a small amount of truth to that. That is, some people will go into debt to get cool new stuff, like when new iPhones come out or whatever. But generally speaking, it's just nonsense. As a macroeconomic principle, it's complete nonsense. In fact, Herbert Walker Bush called it voodoo economics in the 1980 presidential primary. But Wanniski said, with the supply-side economics, you can do the following. When Republicans are in office, you can spend money like a drunken sailor, which will stimulate the economy and make people think that Republicans know how to have a good economy. It'll also produce a huge deficit. But you don't talk about that. But then as soon as a Democrat comes into the White House, you start squealing about the deficit and insist that they cut the spending that you just engaged in, that they cut back on it, forcing Democrats to shoot Santa, to shoot because he's, Jude Wanniski, the two Santa Claus theory was his phrase. He invented it. And he said, Americans have always thought of Democrats as Santa Claus. They brought us Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, workplace safety rules, housing support, food stamps, as aid to women and infant children. I could go on, right? Virtually every social program in America came out of the Democratic Party. And Republicans opposed every single one of them. And so Republicans were always viewed as Scrooge. And so Wininski said, Republicans need to be Santas too. So we'll be tax cut Santas, he said. And they did, and they have. And they've been doing this ever since. Reagan took our national debt from $800 billion to $2.4 trillion. It's massive. I mean, it's just a massive increase in our national debt. And every time there's been a Republican in the White House, Donald Trump added over $8 trillion to the deficit or to the national debt. And now the Republicans are saying, well, the national debt's $33 trillion. We got to cut spending. Yeah, right. The national debt is $33 trillion because of two simple things. A series of tax cuts, 3 of them by Reagan, 2 of them by George W. Bush, a massive one by Donald Trump. So, number 1, tax cuts. And number 2, 2 illegal wars that cost us $8 trillion that George W. Bush didn't even put on the books. If you look at, deficits, they were doing this morning on Morning Joe. Barack Obama had an $8 trillion deficit. Donald Trump had an $8 trillion deficit. George W. Bush had around a $5 or $6 trillion deficit. Well, in fact, of that $8 trillion deficit that Barack Obama had, about half of that was actually George W. Bush's deficit. He just never put it on the books. So when Obama came in, he was like, hey, there's trillions of dollars here that we owe that's literally not on our books. We have to put this on the books. And so it got credited to him. So anyhow, this is the game that they're playing, this 2 Santa Claus theory. They've been doing it forever, and they're doing it again, and the media always falls for it. The media never says, oh, yeah, every time there's a Republican in the White House, they spend like crazy, and they run up the debt, and every time there's a Democrat, they start squealing about the national debt. Nobody ever says that. Instead, they're like, well, looks like we've got a debt crisis now. We need to pay attention to this. This is serious stuff. As the Republicans are talking about shutting down the government because of the debt crisis that they created. Anyhow, there's an op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. It's called "The Shutdown is the 2 Santa Claus Scam Rearing Its Ugly Head Again." You can check it out. Meanwhile, woke. My colleague here on SiriusXM, we're on SiriusXM Progress. Howard Stern has his own channel on SiriusXM. It's the Howard Stern channel. In fact, I think he's got a couple of them. And yesterday, it was great. Howard Stern, on his own program, played a clip of a fan on YouTube basically trash-talking him, saying that, you've gone woke, Howard. And Howard comes back, he says, I hear that a lot, that I'm not good anymore because I'm woke. He says, by the way, I kind of take that as a compliment that I'm woke. I'll tell you how I feel about it. To me, the opposite of woke is being asleep. And if woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, dude, call me woke as much as you effing want. He goes on to say, I'm not for stupidity, I ran out Friday morning. I was over at CVS. Thank you, CVS. I went over there at 9 a.m. and got myself the new vaccine for COVID. Effing science. This effing country is so great. I am woke, mother effer, and I love it. I want to be awake. I want to read legitimate news sources. Here's how woke I am. I believe the election was not rigged. I'm woke. I think that's a compliment. Incredible. God bless Howard Stern. I am woke, too. Are you woke? We've got to come up with some new slogans for this show, like the home of woke. Woke, yes, we embrace our queer brothers and sisters. We embrace people of all races and religions and denominations and whatever. It's pretty straightforward stuff.